be talking about all things photography. Now, what gives me the right to talk about all things photography? My career spans well over a decade, and I started off working for BlackBerry. Initially I worked for O2, then I worked for BlackBerry, and then I moved from BlackBerry to Sony. And my time at Sony, I spent nearly 6 years there, and I did everything from being a field trainer to a field sales manager, and then I was a product training specialist. So in that role, my duty was to understand the raw technicalities of TVs and audio equipment and put them into layman's terms, basically, for people to understand how they work. And then in turn, the salespeople to be able to use that educational piece to train the store staff to sell the product better, to make it, someone comes in to buy a TV, the story that they would get behind purchasing that story would be really relative to the end user, as opposed to just saying, oh yeah, well it's 4K and it's got a Blu-ray player and yeah, it does super bit mapping, and the customer just going, shh, not knowing what to talk about. Whilst I was at Sony, I was expecting my little girl Isabella, and someone said to me, a guy called Sam Pillin, and he headed up the training for camera. So I headed up the training for TV and sound, he headed up the training for camera, and we used to tour a lot all around the UK. Majority of the times we would be in like 2 cities a week. It was pretty intense for about 6 months. And he said to me, go get a camera. You're going to expect a little girl, go get yourself a camera. And that was it. I picked up a camera, and the first camera I picked up was a Nex 5N. And it blew me away. Like, as soon as I picked it up, it was amazing, absolutely amazing. And as they say, like, the rest is history, but there's loads in between. But effectively I caught the bug, and it progressed from there. So I started off shooting anything and everything as a hobby, and then potentially eventually that hobby changed into, I thought, I could turn this into a career. At the time, Sony wasn't doing too great with TVs, so I was looking at a redundancy, basically. The team was shrinking because Sony's TV business wasn't faring too well. So I made a decision to leave, and I briefly spent a bit of time at TomTom and some various other roles, but ultimately in the background I was freelancing as a photographer. And I'd done that for a fair bit of time. And then after a while, Bowens came knocking on my door. So they headhunted me and they said, okay, cool, you've got the consumer electronics sales and marketing experience from Sony, and you can also do this photography. You've got the perfect blend of skill sets, so why don't you join our team to be our UK sales manager? So I joined the team as a UK sales manager, and my job was to be the UK sales manager. So we would sell into the likes of Wex, Calumet, Park Cameras, Wilkinson, a whole range of UK retailers, and we'd also support shows. So we'd done the photography show, SWPP, all the things you would imagine from a flash photography manufacturer I was involved in. And it was really good for me because before that point I hadn't had much exposure, excuse the pun, to flash photography. But being involved in Bowens, I had to understand it really quickly and know how to use it really quickly. So I had conviction as a salesman, and I did so, and I've been utilising flash ever since, and it's changed my photography so much. If you get a chance, you can head to my website. So my website is www.lukecurtis.co.uk, and my Instagram is also lukecurtis.co.uk. I'm updating all my other socials because I currently run a photographic agency called Mind Your Step Studios, but I found over time people want to work with me specifically as a photographer, so they don't really want to go to an agency and use somebody else potentially. And that's not because the other photographers who are involved to a certain degree are not good enough. That's just because photography is a very personal thing. Like, it's like somebody painting you a painting or somebody making you a dress. Like, it's a very exclusive thing, sort of. It's a one-way thing. So I've decided to put more focus into myself as a photographer. The agency will still continue to run in the background, and we service shooting live events, shooting press stuff for artists, all that sort of jazz. That will still continue. But yeah, get a chance, head over to my website and you'll get an understanding of my work and using flash photography and all that sort of stuff. So that's a bit about me. That's kind of, how do I have the right to talk about photography? That's kind of an insight. So for the last decade I've been a photographer. I've also worked in the photographic industry. Since leaving Bowens, I've joined Rotolight. So I have gone from working for a traditional filament bulb flash company with 90 years of heritage to working for an LED based video and still lighting company. So it's kind of a changing of, it's a key point in the life cycle or the lifespan of flash photography or lighting in a professional way. You've got the old technology, and that's a company that now have, you know, made an official announcement that they've gone into liquidation and now ceased trading. So 90 years of heritage is going now, and I now work for a company that is literally at the forefront of development of lighting technology in both video and still. So it's amazing for me to have an insight into both these categories, and it's always a learning curve. Like, I'm learning stuff every day, which is amazing. Like, I absolutely love it. It makes me very, very happy, and it's an extremely cool place to work, and there's some great people there. So that's kind of a bit about me and why I've got any right to talk about photography in any capacity, being a photographer, having insight to the industry. What I really wanted to talk about today was Bowens. So Bowens have now made the announcement, and they made an announcement so I've just got it up on Petapixel. So they made it, when did they make it? What's the date stamp on this? So the 20th, so the 20th, 2017, they made it official, the 20th of July 2000 official, rest in peace Bowens, 1923 to 2017, so 90 odd years of heritage. And that's kind of the first thing I want to talk about, really. When you're a technology manufacturer, talking about heritage is probably one of the worst things you can do. Like, yeah, sure, you're going to have heritage and that's all cool, and a lot of big brands will do that. So Sony, for instance, had great heritage in the consumer electronics market. They never really sort of like relied on it, if that makes sense. They were always creating new technologies and pushing things forward. Because the problem is, if you rely on your heritage, you're obsolete. Like, your reliance is obsolete like that technology, because all technology gets better over time. So for instance, we look at, you know, their original cameras, not the original cameras, but if you look at the Nex 5N, like I started taking pictures on, great camera, it was a 3/3 sensor, the E-mount lens system was a new venture as opposed to A-mount. It was new, you know, it was kind of a new thing, a flip-up screen and this live view and all these new technologies that at the time no one said would catch on. Like, oh, those technologies will never last, it's a gimmick. Over time, that technology has been developed further and further and further, and you now have cameras like the A9. Like, the A9 is the fastest camera in the world. Like, and it doesn't just beat the next fastest by a little bit, it's a totally different league. Like, and that's because they're always pushing the technologies and change it. And the Nex 5N, no, it's not an obsolete bit of kit, but people don't go out their way to buy them now. They buy the next thing. And that's the problem with talking about heritage. If you rely on your heritage as a technology company, you're relying on obsolete banter, effectively, you know, obsolete talk to keep selling your product. It's not going to work. People don't want to buy a product that's 20 years old. So that's kind of like my first point on Bowens. And from working there, that was the internal theme. Like, everybody who spoke about, oh yeah, back in the heyday, we used to make X amount of flashes and we'd sell them all and we were king of the castle, and like, that's cool, but you can't talk like that. You need to be thinking, you know, what's the next problem we need to solve? Like, what's the next thing we need to do? And there was none of that. And that functionality within a business should be driven by the marketing department, without a shadow of a doubt. The marketing and the sales department need to work hand in hand to understand how the end users are using the product and what problems those end users are facing. Because there's no point making a feature that already exists. Like, yeah, of course, it's good to have it as an auxiliary, but you need to be pioneering. So, okay, what's a problem that people face? A tilting screen would be great. So Sony went out and they produced a screen that tilts backwards. Fantastic for a whole host of photographers that shoot in that way. Bowens should have been doing that. Like, before they launched their Generation X product, rather than replicating what was already in the market, what they should have done was looked and spoken to photographers, done some focus groups and got an insight to what the problems those photographers were facing. You know, was the flash power too much? Did they need a lesser capacity unit, like a 250 or a 150? Did they need something in between, like a speed light and a full-on sort of 400 watt system? None of that took place, as far as I'm aware, from the insight talk that I've had from them. You know, it wasn't done, and ultimately that's one of the reasons they've said on Petapixels is they couldn't keep up with changing trends. Now, that shouldn't be a hard thing to do. If you've got passion for the industry and you've got half a clue of what you're doing, you should be doing the market research to understand what's going on in the market and what potentially is going to go on in the market, to then develop products for the next generation of customers. Because those customers that you're talking about heritage from 20, 40 years ago, they're going to stop buying at some point. And a lot of them had stopped buying at some point. So that's one of the reasons they put down. They couldn't keep up with current trends. Now, if you look at all the other flash manufacturers out there, Profoto, Elinchrom, hence, like there's loads of them. They haven't had a problem because they've done their market research. They understand what needs to be done and they've gone out and done it. So high speed sync is a new thing. Everybody's getting these amazing lenses that shoot at 1.4, and you've got an amazing lens that shoots at 1.4. The first thing you want to do is get outside and shoot with it. Okay, cool, so I want to shoot at 1.4, I'm outside, brilliant. The sun is literally bleaching everything in the scene, so I have to ramp up my shutter speed, take it out to 8,000. If I try to use a single burst of light, I'm going to get that black barring effect, I'm going to get a similar effect. It's not going to work. So high speed sync was developed because all these amazing lenses are coming around and photographers want to go outside. Probably one of the reasons they've done it. And other manufacturers have had the capacity to do that. So that reason isn't really a great reason. Like that's someone's accountable for that, or a group of people are accountable for that. The other reason that they've put down is cheap Chinese manufacturers. Now, in every industry in the world, there will be premium brands and there will be economy brands. And that doesn't stop the premium brands from trading or premium brands from making products. It doesn't at all, because people will always sit in a wide bandwidth. You have people that will spend less money and people that will spend more money. And there are products that suit each of those categories. Cheap Chinese products are not the reason Bowens went down. The reason Bowens went down is, one, they didn't do their market research to understand what the market was doing, and two, they made a fatal error of using a cheap Chinese manufacturer to produce their new range of products. So the XMT, the battery powered system, everybody knows that's made by Godox. So if I was the end user and I had a choice of buying one that's over £1,000 with a Bowens label on it, or buying one that's half that price, maybe even less, by a company like Godox, what am I going to do? They're exactly the same product. They're literally exactly the same product. So you would go and buy, that one if budget was an issue. If budget wasn't an issue and you wanted more premium, you'd go and spend, the money on the Bowens label. But over time, Bowens brand and their brand prestige or brand perception in the market has started to erode. They took pre-orders way too soon on the new XMT or the Generation X products. They couldn't deliver them to market in time, so customers and distributors got angry, and their brand slowly started to wither away from this fantastic brand that pioneered flash photography and was once amazing and literally the top of the game, to losing all of that respect, being late to market with products that were already out of date. Like crazy. The product that they did build in-house, the XMS, the studio flash system, and I've used the XMT and I've used the XMS. The XMS was fantastic, and the guys in-house that developed that, like honestly, hats off to you guys. They produced a fantastic bit of kit. Like it's really good. The trigger system, maybe not great, but in terms of what it can do for speed, so do some research in this, but they developed a flash tube with 3 pins. Now that 3 pin allows for a faster decay rate on the light. So a faster decay rate on the light means that your flash duration can be way significantly less. And that's amazing, because if you're thinking about capturing action and you need like that split second of light, to freeze the action, you want the shortest flash duration as possible. You don't want any of that light lingering around. And they managed to achieve that with the XMS. And if they spent more time focusing and doing the right market research and allowing the R&D department to produce a product in line with that market research, they would have been fine. But instead they outsourced the manufacture of their saviour to a cheap Chinese manufacturer, and people were aware of it. So they literally dug their own grave and jumped in it, and it's horrible. And I'm not saying this because I'm bitter in any sense. I'm giving this because I've got an insight to what's going on, and I can't validate any of the reasons. And I've had conversations with people outside of this video, and none of them can validate the reasons either. It doesn't make sense. One of the other reasons they've put in is the changing behaviour of photographers. So they've stated that photographers no longer spend money unless it's gonna give them a return on investment. So for instance, if I was gonna go buy a new piece of kit, I wouldn't buy it unless it would generate me more money. Now, for me specifically, I know that's not the case, and I know it's not the case because I like to be an early adopter. If there's a new technology, I want it in, I want it now. If there's a new movie out, I want it now, I want to be involved. No thought about how much money it's going to make me at a later date. If I think it's going to complement what I already do, I want it, I'm going to go out and buy it. So that statistic doesn't work for me. Like it doesn't, it doesn't apply to me. Yes, there are maybe some photographers out there that won't buy gear unless it's going to give them money. So Bowens are saying that back in the day, photographers were more frivolent with their money and they would spend here, there and everywhere, but now their belts are tighter. I'd say everybody's belts are probably tighter to a certain degree, but also what's happened is the consumer is more educated. Like the photographer this day and age are so much more educated. Back in the day, to be a photographer, you had to understand a dark room, and there was so much to it, and it was such a skill, such a prestige skill to do. Not many people could do it or had the passion to apply themselves to do it. This day and age, everybody is a photographer. If you own a mobile phone, everybody has the potential to be a photographer. You've got a camera in here, you've got access to Instagram, potentially you're a photographer. Anybody can go out and take pictures. In the past, people couldn't do that. So it's not a case of photographers being tighter with their belt. Photographers are better educated, and they won't waste money on products that don't apply to their usage. Why would you go out and buy gear if you're not going to use it, or it doesn't, if it's not going to solve a problem? And the end user knows that. They're far more intelligent. And if I was going to go out and buy a piece of kit, I'd be looking at future proofing. I'd be looking at like cutting edge. That's why I'm an early adopter. Like I want something that's right on the cusp of development. And that's a really good reason why I've ended up joining Rotolight, because they are pioneering in that field, and it's so good to be on that journey with them. It's phenomenal. So yeah, I don't personally think photographers are tightening their belts as such. I think that the end user, ultimately the purchaser of these products, are more intelligent, and they make more intelligent decisions with their purchases. And that, and if your product isn't strong enough, those intelligent people making those intelligent decisions are not going to buy a weak product. It's a no-brainer. Like, it's literally a no-brainer. So the 3 reasons: cheap Chinese manufacturers beating them to the punch. Not true, because your product is manufactured by a cheap Chinese manufacturer. People are not going to spend the money on your product when they can buy exactly the same for less money. Couldn't keep up with market trends or emerging technologies. Well, you could keep up with emerging technologies if you've done enough market research. And the 3rd one, the changing behaviour of photographers. Yes, behaviour has changed, but it's changed for the better. People are better educated, and for the companies that are surviving and flourishing, that's good, because they are educated enough and intelligent enough to be able to service those intelligent and educated people out in the field, and they're going to make features and products that appeal to that audience, and they'll keep on doing so. A good example would be the guys at Rotolight, looking ahead as opposed to looking back. Back in our heyday, we were this, we were that. If you're a technology company, talking about your heritage is like, it would be like Sony trying to sell you a VHS player. No one's going to buy a VHS player. People want to buy Blu-ray players, or they want to buy a streaming box to download content from or stream content over the internet. So yeah, I've ranted on quite a little bit. I wanted to keep this under like 15 minutes, and I'm already fast approaching 20. But because I've got the ability to speak out about it, because I was at Bowens and I've seen sort of what's gone on firsthand, I wanted to talk about it. And it's not to be controversial or disruptive. I think if a company has 90 years of heritage, I know hundreds of people that have had interactions with Bowens products, either through university, college, assisting, or using the products themselves firsthand. Like, they deserve, they deserve to know exactly what's gone on. And I might get my knuckles rapped at some point, or sort of might get some grief off the back of this. I'm not doing it to be negative towards Bowens. I'm doing it because it feels like the right thing to do, because I've spoken to so many people off record about, oh my god, what happened to Bowens, and you just get these 3 reasons for them not going. Those 3 reasons are not validated on the surface. The reasons I believe that they haven't been able to continue trading are, they haven't done the right market research. There wasn't enough passion internally to drive that. If you love photography and you love the industry, you'll be involved in it. Like, you'll be so ingrained in the cogs of what goes on, and you would know what customers want and what they need, or through first-hand experience you'd be like, do you know what, this is what we need, this is what we need, you know, and that didn't exist there, and that then failed to give the right response in terms of market resource to create the right products. And because they couldn't create the right products, they panicked, and the panic then led them to get a cheap Chinese manufacturer to manufacture a product almost exactly the same as what they've already got. And once that information got out into the industry, people weren't ever going to spend the money on that product, because there is exactly the same with another manufacturer's logo on it for less money, you know. So that's kind of like my spiel on Bowens and a bit about myself. It's a massive shame. From my time at Bowens, I learned so much, and there are some fantastic people within that company. Like, I mean, fantastic people. And it's a real shame, sort of, the future that they face. And I know that they have the skills and personalities to go on to better things. And it's truly a sad time for photography, losing Bowens. But at the same time, we work in a technological industry, like technology. We need pioneers, we need innovators, because technology does not stop. Like, and if you fall off of it, like Nokia is a good example. Nokia were once, if you had a mobile phone, you had a Nokia. I remember as a kid, everyone had a Nokia. There wasn't another phone manufacturer to use. Like, you had a Nokia. It was as simple as that. Like, if you had a mobile phone, you had a Nokia. Simple. Like, absolutely simple. And where did they go? You know, they still produce phones, yes, of course, but for a little period of time, they lost sight of stuff, and they lost sight of stuff because they got complacent, and, you know, they lost their innovation. They've done well to recover themselves now, but look at iPhone, look at Android phones. There wasn't that many options around back in the day, and that's the same when Bowens were in charge and leading the market. There wasn't many options around, and they led that market phenomenally well. Like, phenomenally, it was a £10 million company at one point. Like, that's pretty impressive. So yeah, that is pretty much in a nutshell. If you get the opportunity, please subscribe, and you will get more videos like this. If you want to ask any questions, like, hit me up in the comments. You know, feel free to troll me, do whatever you feel fit. Like, I'll respond to as much as I possibly can. I'm quite interested to hear your thoughts. If you think I've stepped out of line or said anything like that, I really apologise, and it isn't being vindictive in any capacity. Like, I think if you've got almost 100 years of heritage behind you, the last thing you can do is just say, well, the first thing you should do in a situation like this is just say, look guys, this is the situation, and this is where we move on from here. So that's me over and out. Subscribe, leave some comments, and get a chance. So if you get a chance, hit up my website, which is www.lukecurtis.co.uk. Thank you.